I'm not just writing history, I am making it.
I have the brain of a historian and the clapback of a comedian.
You better come with sources because I always check footnotes.
Hello, welcome to another episode of Historians on Housewives. You're here with me, Casey.
Hi, you're here with me, Dr. J. Mill, the Millionaires.
You're also here with me, Max, flying economy.
So today we have kind of a heavier but really important episode topic to cover, going over domestic violence, intimate partner violence, and child abuse. And so you might notice for listeners that tune in regularly that our Bonko Party and our Bravo News segment are very close to the beginning so that we could handle all of the more lighthearted things initially right up at the front without interrupting the flow of the conversation later. And I think to set up the episode today, it's really the perfect opportunity to let Jessica take it away on her new book project and the ways in which she is grappling every day in her own writing right now with issues of domestic violence and survivors.
Well, thank you. I'm so excited that we are doing this episode. It's a very important episode, and I think that it has the potential to actually change some people's lives. Hopefully, if people are listening that are struggling with an abusive situation or aren't quite sure if they're in an abusive situation, hopefully our guest will help clarify and provide some steps for you to assess your situation. My second book project, or rather my next book project, I never thought I'd be able to say second book. My next book project looks at African-American women, intimate partner violence in the post-Civil War South. So I look particularly at the first 50 years after enslavement and how African-American women are protesting things that might be happening in their personal life. This is the first time, and I need to underscore this is the first time that African-American women had legal control of their own bodies. So I deal with questions such as if they go and take a husband to court or a boyfriend to court because he is beating on her, or if they alert the authorities, what does this mean, particularly in this moment when at one point, they're testing the boundaries of having legal rights. But at the same time, if you know anything about African-American culture, what you do not do is go to the authorities. I'm also looking at it in terms of a kind of proto-feminist moment in that if self-care and Black feminism are intertwined, this would also be a moment that we see this manifesting itself. And thirdly, the book is really interested in this afterlife of abuse. What does it mean to reconcile one's life? What does it mean to negotiate? At this point, what African-American women are negotiating is not just a new Southern system, a new system of laws without slavery, but they're also negotiating new laws that allow them to get married, allow them to actually have a personal life that was not before recognized. So what is put in jeopardy when they encounter these situations? And it's very interesting. There's some very heartbreaking stories, but there's also some empowering stories that even with everything against them, women felt that it was important enough to go to the courts or go to someone who could help them rectify their situation. So I don't want to say I'm enjoying this work. That's not the right way to say it, but it's a very interesting journey that these women are taking me on. And I look forward to bringing their stories to everyone in the greater public.
Fulfilling.
May I say this? The first book that you do, the 10-year book, some people do it. They don't have any problems. It's very status quo. They do it. It's great. Goes on to win great awards. Some of us also fulfilling. Some people have joy when they write. my first project, I didn't feel like I had joy when I was writing. It felt onerous. It felt heavy. It just felt I wasn't enjoying the process.
You carry the people with you.
I carried the people with me,
Yeah.
right? As you know, because you do slavery, you just carry it, and so I was carrying that. And I've talked about that more in other places, but with this project, it's fulfilling, and I feel like whereas in the first book project, where Charity Folks was used to being remaining hidden, and I felt like I was ciphering through these layers of her remaining hidden. I feel like these women want their stories told. And so there's a different kind of energy, and there's a different kind of like activism that kind of even takes over with the pen. So I'm just honored that I can tell their stories, and can't wait to bring them into the public light.
Our guest today, Rosie Jones, is the programs manager at Turning Point, a St. Louis area domestic and sexual violence shelter. Additionally, she adjuncts for local universities in her area. Her research interests include intimate partner violence, the social construction of menstruation, and gender and policy. So with that, welcome Rosie Jones.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So I would like us to jump right into our Bonko Party game break. And I think it's important to do this first today so that we don't break up our flow of the things we're going to be talking with you about. So today's game is called Design Your Yacht Day. So I was thinking of this as if you could have the ultimate below deck med pampering, who would you pick? So I'm going to make this a collaborative game. So so the three of you have to agree on who you're going to pick as captain, bosun, chef, and chief stew.
Okay.
Right. So this is if historians on Housewives set sailing today. Okay. And you guys can fight it out and, lobby to convince each other of who you want leading this boat. So our first up is, who do you want for captain? We've had three choices here. We have Captain Lee, Captain Sandy, and Captain Mark. I think we tend to forget about him, but he existed for one season.
He never came out of his cabin.
No, he just stayed there the whole time.
Yeah, he was definitely a little less involved than Lee or Sandy. So which of those three captains do you want running the H-on-H cruise?
I would say for sure Captain Sandy.
Okay, we have a vote for Sandy.
Why?
I think she cares about the crew, but does so in a very professional way. I like that she sets boundaries and knows when it's time to leave the dinners and takes constructive feedback.
Did you feel that? Did you see the season finale of Below Deck?
Yes.
Did you feel that after Aisha levied that mutinous charge against her?
Right. I liked that Sandy took it and reflected upon it, and then had that follow-up conversation with Hannah.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't want to say that I would say none of them. I was actually raised not on a yacht, okay, because, but I was raised on a freshwater 21-foot boat. But I understand the importance of making sure everything is set up. So I like the Captain Sandy really got on them about the table designs. I was with her. What is this? It should already be set up before anyone walks out. Do it the night before. I don't know if that's because of my upbringing, but I felt with her on that. I did not like the treatment that she gave the women over the men, or the men over the women, because they were just as much of drunken screw-ups. They were drunken screw-ups, at least Travis, right? Am I getting it right?
Oh, yes.
Drunken screw-up.
And they really all were. Travis was just the most egregious.
Yeah. In terms of Captain Lee, I like how he describes himself as kind of not really. Look, wait. Let me pause. Did he say this or did Casey? He describes himself as kind of an outlier. He doesn't fit the brand. Is this you guys that said this, or?
I don't know who said this.
But he says he doesn't really fit the Bravo brand because he's kind of rough and tumble in some ways.
We did have a conversation about this recently.
This was one of our Bravo demics.
Okay, this is one of our Bravo demics.
I forget which one. Because we talk about Captain Lee a lot.
Oh my God, we're not citing women properly.
I know.
We just was
it Emily Riles? Might have been.
We're gonna have to go back to our own archives. That's not good politics. I will say, of all three, Captain Mark. Did I make his name up?
No, that's Captain Mark.
This is what happens when you record late in the day and you don't want another cup of coffee because you'll be too jittery. Of all of them, Captain Mark would work for me the best because he just stayed to himself. I mean, that's more like my personality in those kind of situations. But Max gave me the eye like, nah, I'm not Captain Mark.
Yeah, Captain Mark seems a little bit like mashed potatoes to me.
What do you mean, like a mess? Or what do you mean?
He can be a mess. No, he just seems like we're filming a show here. Like, give me a little something. Like, Lee always puts his masculinity up front and center, and I think that's part of his appeal on Bravo.
And he brings it for the camera. Is that what you're saying?
He brings it for the camera. Captain Mark didn't leave his room. Like, I think some people are going to be like running to their computers right now listening to us talk about Captain Mark.
What did Captain Mark look like again?
Yeah.
So you're saying he didn't give us enough?
Yeah. I'm going to have to go with our guess that like Sandy might be the best. And this might come from me feeling a little mutinous on board the ship. And I think Sandy is the most lax, as we saw with Jack.
Jack.
Yeah, with Jack this season, of like not actually doing the work. He was really lazy.
Are you going to cave? Are you going to say Sandy? We have to have consensus.
I mean, politically, I can't not say Sandy, right?
On Bravo.
But I did go ahead and say this is the positive and the negative. So I was well representative and analytical about it. Sure, I'll cave. If you guys want to go with Sandy, that's fine. But I insist on a white party and the white gloves.
Okay.
All right. So now we are on to our bosun. And this list is a bit longer because we've had a variety of bosuns.
Oh, wow. I thought the game was over.
We got a captain. We're done.
Okay. So do you want Eddie, Ashton, Chandler, EJ, Kelly, Joao, or Conrad? Who do you like, Rosie?
I think I might have to go with Conrad. But it's really a lesser of all evils kind of situation. I didn't think it was fair that Hannah got more of the heat during their romance. But I think as far as like treating other people, I think Conrad probably comes out as the strongest for me.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see how Ashton does. But I feel like Conrad maybe seems like he was one of the more passionate about working on a boat.
Yeah, I mean, I think he grew up around like New York Harbor.
I mean, Joao is passionate about boats. He just doesn't get along with anybody.
Yeah, let me just say that Joao will not be on the team with me. He will not be doing anything for fear that the toxic masculinity will be released somewhere along the trip. I'm going to be voted off this particular conversation because of all the choices you gave us. I mean, I guess Conrad, but despite what I just said about Travis and Jack, one of them would just be so much more fun.
Travis did bosun for like one or 2 days while Joao was recovering from hepatitis.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Travis is a good addition. I might go with Travis instead.
I can
add Travis since he technically bosuned for like a day.
It was either going to be that or I felt like I was going to have to argue the merits of Joao. Because I felt like if we're stuck at sea, listen to me, hear me out. If we're stuck at sea, you're like really staring at me right now. If we're stuck at sea, I want the guy that is like setting his clock to the stars. Like he seems like he is on top of everything. Taken. He's a complete ass. I don't want to be around him when we're not working. I don't even want to be around him while we're working.
We're supposed to be getting pampered.
Oh, if we're pampered?
Yeah, who is steering our boat?
Oh, yeah, then him. I want that guy because Travis too.
Travis, he's got the fun. He's got the water toys out. He's got, he's gawking at you inappropriately, making you feel attractive.
He might have a bear in his pocket.
If you're here for a fun time guy, Travis is great. He's gonna, break all the rules about what is appropriate and not appropriate. But if you want someone we trust our life with, I guess, Joelle.
I went with the responsible decision, but I think if we're there two-party, we want to get into a situation that may cause a lawsuit.
How do you feel about the addition of Travis, Rosie?
I agree. I think he's much more fun than a lot of our other choices. But like, if the tip is thinking, I want Joao.
You want Joao too? Is that what you said?
Yeah. If we're in active Titanic mode,
okay,
then yes.
Okay,
Point.
So Joao, if we actually need a concern for safety.
Just so you know, he is not going to let women and children go first. Just so you know, if anything happens.
That's why I want him. He's
taken over the life preserver, you're not, or whatever, the piece of whatever, what was she hanging on at the end of the
door?
The door. Yeah, he's going to knock you right off of that.
That was definitely big enough for Jack, too.
Yep.
But that's why I want him. I want him to look out for numero uno, me.
Okay. So you are thinking like an academic on this ship.
Yeah.
But bump.
Okay. How about picking our chef? We have a couple of chefs to pick from here. Ben, Adam, Leon, Mila, or Kevin, the new guy. And for those of you that were watching the first episode of the premiere and were really confused about why he was yelling Mr. Dobson in the toilet, his last name is Dobson.
So he was having a movement.
Yes, he was very, very ill. He had like an internal discomfort, like some sort of bug or something, and it was impairing him from being able to cook for the guests. But so he kept yelling Mr. Dobson, but Mr. Dobson is his name.
Can I just say he's out? Because he's not serve safe if that's happening around the food.
Right. Absolutely not.
Okay, who is your favorite chef, Rosie?
So I think if I'm not dealing with them actually in the galley, then I would probably say Ben, because I don't know if I would trust Adam to actually follow my preference sheet.
That's so true. It's a good point.
Right, because he did that. He knew that guy didn't want onions.
Yeah, and he gave him days worth of onions.
Yeah.
I mean, I suppose I already cooked like Mila in college, right? Like if you need really cheap nachos in the middle of the night.
You could be a 5-star Michelin chef on board a super yacht.
Yeah, I appreciate you throwing Mila in there just to look representative, but come on now. She shouldn't be on the list at all.
She's less serve safe than Kevin.
Oh, yeah. Didn't she lick the steaks?
Yeah.
Oh, gosh. Okay. Okay, so Rosie's going with Ben. Are you guys okay with Ben?
I am affirming Ben. I was already on board with him before the question was finished.
Casey loves Ben, and I've been trying to love Ben for so long. I'll just leave it with he will take care of all my weird academic dietary issues and restrictions. So I'll go with Ben. I won't. Well, no, I don't.
Begrudgingly,
I'm
it sounds like.
Begrudgingly, I'm like, I don't. As a person, he could give us more.
I think in general, all the chefs could give us more as people.
You know what I'd love to have? Like, I would like to have. This is my fantasy. Let's have a below deck, but let's have someone like, I don't know, Gordon Ramsay. Or one of his spin-off people, like the presentation of the food, all the details. Can we just switch shows?
Okay, for your chief stew, you can choose from Kate, Hannah, or Adrian. So those are your 3 stews. However, Kate Chastain has said recently that Dorinda Medley would make an excellent stew.
Yes,
because of how she wants to make it nice. So I am willing to put Dorinda Medley here as your chief stew as an option, even though she hasn't appeared on the show, but because Kate says that it is the housewife that could stew.
You're just putting her on there because you know she'll decorate for every holiday.
Yes.
Those would be the best table settings.
Dorinda Medley, hands down.
What do you think, Rosie?
Dorinda all the way.
Okay, so we just had a Dorinda crossover, but we're really for it.
What do you like about Dorinda, Rosie?
All of her little decorations at her house, that very like Bethany looking doll, the cake, everything. She has a fifth room really that she could bring along.
So you love her Berkshire's parties then?
Yes, I think they're adorable.
I definitely wish that I could just peek inside her decorations closets.
You want to see if she has any sweatshirts or sweaters, don't you?
Oh, she has so many, I'm sure. She probably has better Jingle Bell sweaters than I have.
Brenda, if you're listening, perhaps you and Casey can have a craft night to make some sweaters.
So for all of our listeners, the final tally on our Bonko party game, we have Captain Sandy, Joao as bosun, Ben as our chef, and Dorinda Medley as our chief stew. Woo! And that concludes Bonko party today. Everybody's a winner. So, if it's okay with you, I'd like us to move into some more serious questions for you, Rosie.
Yeah.
So, how did you get into Bravo, and how does watching the shows on the network help you with maintaining a work-life balance?
Sure. So I really got into Bravo when I was in grad school. And I would log in on my computer through my parents' charter, their TV network. And so I could watch it when I would get home from class. And it would just be such a great way to unwind, or like you need to write 3 more pages before you can watch an episode, as like a little motivational tool. And now I use it as like a great getaway stress reliever from work. I work at a domestic violence shelter, and so I deal with some pretty traumatic problems on a daily basis. And it's really nice to go home and watch stuff that it like captures problems that are big and small, but a majority of the problems are things that would be great to have as problems instead of like the problems that I deal with our clients every day.
Yeah, I would think that dealing with, can Kyle buy this watch when she's on vacation seems like a much lighter issue for the day.
Right, absolutely.
So I am super remiss because I forgot to ask you to share your Housewives tagline with us.
Yeah.
So Rosie, please share what your Housewives tagline would be.
Okay, and I'm going to start like moving my head, so it's very dramatic. I don't play the victim. I help empower them.
Oh,
I love that.
That is so good.
That is so good. That is so good. Do you have a sound effect?
That deserves some applause.
That was such a good tagline.
That was so good. I'm going to ask you to repeat it.
There were multiple levels to that.
You should have seen all of our faces. We were all like instantly like, whoa.
So can I ask you to repeat it on 3?
Sure.
1, 2. Oh, because you're going to get dramatic and move your head. And action.
I don't play the victim. I help empower them.
I just love that. That's such a good tagline.
Mm-hmm. That just resonates.
Thank you.
Like I think it brought tears to our eyes, and I'm not being sarcastic.
Yeah.
That was beautiful.
Thank you.
And it's such a perfect tagline for the work that you're doing and the things that we're talking about today. So I am thrilled that is your tagline.
Me too.
I think that is a great segue into my question that I have for you, which is, how does viewing Bravo shows help people understand the kind of work that you do?
Sure. So I think a lot of people think that domestic violence, intimate partner violence, sexual assault can be kind of this far off thing that happens to their friends or kind of gets whispered about. And there's this really big public and private divide that, like, if you hear something, you don't want to say something. You don't want to say too much about it because what happens in the house stays in the house. That's their business. But when we see intimate partner violence on Housewives franchises, it kind of peels back that curtain and shows that intimate partner violence can happen to anyone, regardless of class, race, gender, sexuality, geographic location. It can really permeate all those levels. The dynamics may be very different, but that power and control stays as a consistent theme. And so I think when intimate partner violence is on TV through the Housewives or just talked about more in the media, viewers are able to see their lives reflected in ways that's not commonly shown. So I think it kind of gives a voice to populations that are often silenced in society, that have already been silenced. And then if they're presented or critiqued in a thoughtful manner, it can really help the audience understand the situation at hand better.
Thank you.
Yeah, that just made me think of the commercial that the Atlanta women did a couple seasons ago about domestic violence, and it brought me back around to New Jersey last season with Dolores Catania's work with the shelter and the benefit for the women and children surviving domestic violence in a way that we don't typically see these populations on the television.
Right.
Who are your top 3 favorite Bravo celebrities, and how did you go about picking them?
So my first one is our chief stew, Dorinda, because I think she's.
I love how you stayed on our new brand. Great.
Right. I think she just always brings a strong presence and is ready to go and call things out. But also has, to me, this very mom vibe about her, which I like. I think she tries to make things homey and fun and cutesy. So I kind of like that balancing act. And I think I see that a lot, in her Instagram. The way that she posts is very how a mom would post on Instagram, and I like that. And then, of course, Bethany. For me, I think it's nice to see a strong, empowered woman. Sometimes she can be problematic, but I like that she speaks her mind, and then also speaks the viewer's mind sometimes too. When she has this really great interview where she's critiquing everyone's outfits of why were we wearing that? We all look like we're coming out of a carnival. Which to me is what is going through the viewer's mind. And then I think my third one would be Lisa Rinna, because she has very good one-liners. I think she brings a fun, lighthearted energy, but then can also turn very quickly, with the whole Kim Richards at the dining table when she broke the wine glass. It makes for good TV, though problematic.
Yeah. These are very popular housewives amongst the Bravo demics. I feel like these 3 housewives in particular are big fan favorites.
Yes.
So you mentioned that you have some conflicted feelings about the new season of Orange County. So I was wondering where you are at with all of these Orange County women right now.
Yeah. So I just watched, I'm a couple weeks behind. I just watched the episode where Kelly bonks Shannon with the mallet.
Yeah.
She didn't do it hard, according to her.
No. And I don't think she did it that hard. I think she looks like a jerk when she did it. And her entire commentary throughout the retreat so far has been very jerk-like. But I don't think she did it that hard. I think Shannon's just being a drama queen. And I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of fabrication of storylines this season. That it just doesn't seem super organic to me. That I think Gina and Emily's friendship seems organic to me. But I think the forcing of Tamra and Shannon and then Vicky as the friend, to me that seems very calculated.
I think the kids on the street would call it thirsty. Calculated,
yes,
and thirsty.
Yes, it is thirsty behavior.
So do you just feel like it's a little too contrived right now?
Yeah, too contrived. And then I don't know, I just got such a weird vibe with that whole train rumor because I don't know, I thought it was strange, and maybe it's just the way that I've only heard people talk about trains, but normally when people talk about trains that I've read, it's usually not a consensual act. And people are talking about it, right? And people are talking about it as if Kelly had participated in a train, then they would be I guess the hope was that she would be slut shamed. But usually a train is typically a sexual assault or multiple rapes. So I just think that was handled very poorly.
Sorry, I keep cutting you off. I'm yes,
sorry.
This is it. You're the first person I've had this conversation with. anytime I hear train, I hear violence. I hear that
Right.
consent. There was no consent, and to have them throwing this around like this was an indication of her loose and wanton ways, it didn't work for me. If they had said she's polyamorous, if they had said she had a threesome, a foursome, or what have you, but the language of train doesn't tell me that would be it wouldn't be it's something that you shouldn't be shaming someone over.
Mm-mm.
And I mean, all that is problematic. What sort of took that over the top for me too, I don't know if you've gotten to this part yet, but when Bronwyn talks about her own sexual experience with her husband, have you? When they're in the hot tub. Oh, do you mind if I spoil something?
No, you can spoil it.
Okay. So Bronwyn, Tamra, and Emily, and maybe Gina.
They're all in the hot tub together.
They're all naked in the hot tub together at one point, or close to naked. And Bronwyn reveals that for her husband's 40th birthday.
Any big birthdays. So I think it's the 0s and the 5s.
Oh, maybe. Okay. Yeah, big birthdays.
Big birthdays.
But specifically for his 40th birthday, they had a threesome. And it became this like... I don't want to say they were quite...
They weren't as judgy. In fact, Gina said something like, oh, maybe a threesome would have saved my marriage. She gets home and she lets her husband know that, hey, I told the women about our threesomes, but don't worry, like Tamra does it too, right? So then all of a sudden, like Tamra and Bronwyn are in this world where they're doing threesomes, but none of the women mind. And like that is like healthy, edgy sexual activity according to the women. But then you have, this Kelly on the train, which comes across as hyper racialized to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think that's also why we don't see any kind of sympathy, right? It's highly racialized and we don't see any sympathy as well, because if we're taking it down the racial line, I mean, certainly Kelly is a Latina some days. It doesn't have any kind of feelings, right? She becomes this object in some ways.
But also, I mean, it's an amazing plot point in and of itself, because look at how far we've come in some ways on the show since Vicky's on the side of the mountain in Whistler screaming at Lori that she's never had multiple partners in her life, and she's calling her a piece of trash, and like her head literally looks like it might pop on the side of Whistler Mountain.
And now look at you. And now look
at how far the cast has evolved, right? So, I feel like in some ways this fits in with your analysis, Rosie, of it feeling very forced and kind of contrived.
Yeah.
Because it's not like they already haven't had many parties where Tamra's talking about, what her and Eddie do in the bedroom. And even the very first episode or second episode when they're at her new housewarming and she's drunk and she's screaming, Eddie, like, I want it in the butt. But like all the guests are still there. Right?
Right. That felt so strange.
Do you remember that this was this season?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that felt so strange. And then they got up on the bar and danced.
Yes, exactly.
During this very like barbecue-esque situation.
So it's so hard for me to see that these Kelly train accusations or even Kelly and cocaine as being anything else but almost like a racial attack against Kelly in a lot of ways.
My thirsty comment, of course, was to Tamra and Eddie. Max has his hand up like we're in the classroom. Hold on.
Well, I was also going to say, like, Kelly, like, we're also talking about this like it's a true rumor.
Oh, yeah.
She's denied it.
Oh, yeah,
too.
that part.
So, like, not only are they feeding into the rumor and slut-shaming her, on top of that, like, she's denying it. And Bronwyn is over here going, like, look at me, and my threesome. Yeah, the racial politics are...
Yeah, and I mean, I feel like Kelly in this moment has even said, I wouldn't mind doing a threesome someday, right? But that's also not a train, which would mean, according to Kelly, that these are activities that she hasn't yet engaged in, right? So the fact that they are slut-shaming her for things that she is, like, I haven't done. And even if she has done, right? Like, I can't understand the slut-shaming aspect of it. Well, if they're not going to treat everybody the same way.
there's also this gender divide, right? Because threesomes, oh, okay, it's the man and two women, but wait for it to be a woman and two men. Let's flip that script. And
Bronwyn said that's like totally off the table for them.
It's usually always off the table for every
the
man.
husband and her and another woman.
But then you have trains, right, where multiple men and a woman victim. I think that people lose sight of the fact that actually, however if you do the reverse, you can actually have multiple women seducing and actually raping a man. So let me just go off on that sidebar for a minute. Everyone's looking at me like I took the train off the track. Rosie, do you want to speak?
No, you're good. Go for it.
So I while we're on this and we're on this like sexuality question and also about consent and non-consent, one of the things that we have spoken about, the three of us, is this Real Housewives of Orange County episode with Tamara's son, and it's called Naked Wasted.
Oh, do you remember this? It was like season 3, like really, or season 4.
No, I don't.
Really early on.
Very early on. I'm giving Casey the cue because we've been very impassioned about this, but there's this episode where everyone wants to plot against Gretchen, right? The new girl, and Tamara's the ringleader.
And Gretchen's fiance, Jeff, at the time, was dying of cancer. I forget which kind of cancer, but he had cancer. He was very, very ill. And so she was out at a dinner party at Tamara's. And Tamara tells Vicky that she's going to get her naked wasted.
And what happens next is Tamara's son assumes the responsibility of not just, enjoying Gretchen, plying with Gretchen with drinks, but also making lewd and licentious
gestures and comments at the table.
At the table.
And then
how old is this Ryan?
This is Ryan,
yes.
And he must have been like maybe
23
or somewhere between 18 and 23.
No, because he comes in season 3 when Tamara first came on, and then he was 23 because I remember Simon giving him a talking to. Like that was like.
So he might be 23 or 24, but it's like clear that he's like had this conversation with his mom that they're going to take down Tamara, and then he essentially
take down Gretchen,
and then he essentially corners and kind of traps Gretchen in a room, and she's clearly.
And the camera's outside the room, so we don't actually see what goes on in there. But there had been coercion throughout the night to like get her to drink more. I was watching it recently in like prep for this, and at one point Ryan very subtly gives the sign for a shocker into the camera, which
at the dinner table,
which is like a sexual act to be performed on with women with your hands, and like that he was like planning on doing that to Gretchen. It was completely disgusting.
And she's like pretty oblivious, like she's just that drunk, and Tamara knows that she is, and Tamara is very vocal with Vicky about how she is essentially going to make Gretchen blackout drunk and essentially sick Ryan on her. And this is what happens, and it's left very ambiguous in the show as to what happens. And because Gretchen's engaged to an older man who's dying, I don't really think it's really ever conclusive what happened in that room. I think that we can assume what happened in that room, and the fact that Gretchen, I don't think she would ever admit
she
what
left
happened.
She said that she left before anything occurred.
Right.
So I'm going to just go with what she said on it.
Right. But it was probably the most horrible housewife scene of any franchise I've ever seen, just in what one housewife was willing to do to another.
Mm-hmm.
Indeed. And I think that forever just, I don't want to say tainted how I viewed Tamara. Because it wasn't just mean girl. It was very predatory, right?
Yeah. No, that's abusive behavior.
Indeed, right? We can all agree on that. I heard you on the mic going, "Ugh, what? Who?" It was really disgusting. So
right, that is really manipulative and dark, just scary.
So, do you mind if I quickly insert our Bravo News update here, because it's actually about Orange County?
Sure.
Okay, so here's our Bravo News update music. Okay, so according to a report that I found from Radar Online, this new season of Housewives, where we see Vicki as demoted as a friend of the show, apparently Bravo asked Alexis to return. And Alexis said she could not and would not return until Tamra Judge was off the show. So Tamra's still on the show. We don't have Alexis back. I wonder if that means if they give Tamra the axe, if we get Alexis. Apparently, since Alexis's departure, Tamra has profited by selling Jesus Jugs coffee mugs.
Jesus Jugs being the nickname she gave Alexis.
Yes. So I wanted you three as our expert panel to weigh in on what you think of this potential for a return of Alexis, a single Alexis, minus Jim, and how you feel about Tamra still being on the show, how you feel like it might go with Tamra off the show, however you want to take this. And the other piece of Orange County Bravo breaking news is that Kelly alleges that Steve Lodge didn't even buy Vicki's engagement ring, that Vicki went and picked out and bought her own engagement ring because she could not even be a friend of the show, apparently, if she wasn't engaged on camera. So these are two different stories that I found. So however the three of you want to take that. Rosie, you're up first.
Sure. So I would say that our last conversation is more proof that it's time for Tamara to go.
Absolutely,
I think,
past time.
Yeah, I think moving her out of the show would also perhaps spark some more organic storylines.
And any thoughts about Vicki buying her own engagement ring?
Oh, I can see that happening, but I also feel like the outrage surrounding it comes from a very gendered place of what are our traditional relationship steps, who's going to provide the ring, what does the ring signify, how would that take away from his masculinity, and all that good stuff.
Cool.
And I would add, Vicki buying her own ring is consistent, right? It's consistent to the brand. It's consistent to her being the moneymaker. So it's not off script or off character at all.
Yeah, I agree with all those points. I mean, Steve Lodge, I think, is the only house husband or fiance in this case to have two human rights court cases against him when he was a police officer. I believe this is alleged. I read this in the OC Register. So, like, I guess because I'm not particularly fond of Vicki, like, they deserve each other. So.
For those listening, Orange County, California is not as horrible as this show is making it out to be. There are nice people in Orange County, California.
Yeah.
But we still do have tense race politics.
Absolutely.
As most places in the United States.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. That was an excellent panel weigh-in for Bravo Breaking News.
So
Okay,
can
sorry.
we pivot to Real Housewives of Beverly Hills? Rosie, given your work on intimate partner violence, can you discuss the early seasons of Beverly Hills, particularly Taylor's storyline?
Yeah. So we meet Taylor and her husband, Russell, in season 1. And when we first meet them, we see that they don't have your typical fairy tale romance, that it's very much a business-based romance. I think Taylor says that it's 80% business, 20% romance. But she knew that when she got married, it's what she, quote, signed up for. So she says that she understood the dynamics of this relationship. And we see, I think it's their first interaction together, kind of this demeaning, like belittling conversation they're having at a restaurant. And Russell says, "So what's the latest with your little company?" And Taylor kind of pushes back and says, "Don't call it little." But she also says she doesn't want to rock the boat too much in case Russell finds a younger, better thing. Saying that, implying that she's a car to trade in and then he can upgrade and get a better, faster, shinier model. But then season 2 comes in and there seems to be some chatter that Russell and Taylor's relationship isn't just it's not based on business, and there's not this romance, but there's actually a level of abuse to it. But it seems that there are a lot of the conversations between Taylor and the other castmates are happening behind the scenes, and that there's this kind of like this repeated pattern of Taylor having highs and lows and going up and down that follow along with the stress of her marriage. And then it all kind of comes out at this tea party that Lisa Vanderpump has with Camille Grammer exposing Taylor's secret.
Do you think that Taylor's experience with her relationship was representative of other survivors?
I think so. I think trying to keep a brave face to the outside while going through something very scary and traumatic inside your home. I think that is a parallel that a lot of people who are in abusive relationships find. I think a lot of the questions from her friends are a lot of the things that survivors say their friends and family ask them. Like, well, we don't see any bruises, or why are you're just telling me all these awful things about him. Now you're leaving our conversation to go away with him for the weekend. Why would you do that if he's such an awful, terrible, scary person? So that's a lot of the rhetoric that survivors hear. And we were hearing Taylor have to face those questions as well.
And also, I mean, with this most recent season of Beverly Hills with Camille in the conversation during the Kavanaugh hearings, saying that, well, I'm a victim too, and I told everybody. So she should have, Dr. Blasey Ford should have told everybody, because that's what I did.
Right. It seems very much that Camille maybe quite doesn't understand that survivors need to have control of their own narrative, and they may not be ready to talk about it on the same timetable as the next survivor, and that's totally fine. They need to just decide if they want to talk about it, who they want to talk about it with, when they want to talk about it, what social circles they want to bring it up with, that it's really never the right of a third party to call it out, to expose it, because that can make things really unsafe for that survivor to have that out in the open.
To going back to Taylor and Russell serving kind of as this foil for Lisa and Ken, and specifically talking more about Ken, situating him in Vanderpump and Beverly Hills, he comes off very aggressive, very belittling, and demeaning to employees, to women on the show. How would you situate him in relationship to Lisa and the other Beverly Hills housewives?
Yeah. So I think that Ken's masculinity really comes out as this protector role of Lisa. That he, his big fight with Kyle in the kitchen this past season. Or when, I think it was with James Kennedy, he, tried to give him this really tough talk to James about Lisa. That he shows this toxic masculinity to protect Lisa, but because he's protecting her, people aren't quick to call it out because he's falling in line with what a romantic man should do, protect his partner.
I feel like the only person that really called him out for it was Yolanda.
Yeah.
And he was very dismissive of her when she was trying to explain how inappropriate he was.
Mm-hmm. We're all nodding our heads.
Yeah, I think, didn't he, there was something, he called her, I think he might have called her a bitch or something at a party, right?
Or maybe he called her stupid.
Yes, it was stupid.
Yeah. And she definitely took offense to that. And I mean, throughout that dinner party, they had that conflict, and then it came up again on the reunion. And Ken was horribly dismissive and demeaning to Yolanda and Yolanda was making perfectly fair points about Ken's behavior toward women.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, she wasn't wrong.
But I so agree with like Ken in particular displays a very toxic masculinity.
Yeah, and he had that whole, I can't remember who it was with, but he said he would never go to counseling. That it's just not what a man would do.
Well, and apparently they had allegedly some lawsuits with Vanderpump Dogs and whatever, and it was because Ken actually got physically aggressive with people. And I'm not sure if these were male employees or female employees or both.
As it was alleged.
Right. But it was alleged that part of their lawsuits going on with Vanderpump Dogs was Ken's aggressiveness with other people. That transcended just a verbal aggression, but had moved into like physical or altercation. And this was a couple seasons ago.
I mean, Ken is also, he's a guy who wears pink shirts and like carries around like really floofy dogs, for lack of a better description for them. And like is very doting on his wife, which all these things I don't tend to associate with like toxic masculinity or behaviors we would associate with toxic masculinity either.
I just feel like once he feels like Lisa is backed into a corner, that he's backed into a corner is where you see this toxicity come out.
Right. And that's, a very traditional gender role. I will protect my woman in my house so much so that it can perpetrate violence onto someone else. I think Ken is very complicated, but I think he's very emblematic of just the type of person that, I don't want to say the type of person we should be looking at. I think Ken's an easy person to look at and say, ooh, I could see there's a volatile behaviorisms there.
Absolutely.
There's some whereas there might be someone else that's a little more shrewd, right? I think this is the definition of sociopaths. To everyone outside, they look normal, but they're really torturing people and terrorizing people in the home.
Well, and I feel like this is that contrast still between Ken and Russell.
I don't know
if you feel the same, but like I feel like, I mean, I think this is maybe part of those friends questioning, like, well, if he's so bad, why are you going? Right? Like that almost like a denial that Russell was cruel.
Right. But if you knew what you were looking for, everyone knew Russell was cruel. Like it wasn't a surprise. Everyone knew Russell was cruel. Okay. I'm clearly talking about someone who's too into these kind of dynamics because I look for it everywhere. Nothing I heard about Russell surprised me.
No, zero. Absolutely zero.
Another facet of domestic violence is the parental abuse of children, which is something that comes up pretty frequently on Roni. I was going to say perhaps the most frequently, but now that we have Dallas, this is a recurrent talking point with Leanne, who's constantly sharing her experience with child abuse. But I was wondering if you could talk to us about Bethany and Ramona's childhoods, and if you could take us on a deep dive on the season 7 encounter that happens between Bethany and her stepfather, John. And what happened in this meeting? What does it tell us about the dynamic between survivors, abusers, and the way that child abuse becomes internalized?
Sure. So to start with Bethany and Ramona, they really have like a heart-to-heart about their abuse. And I think see a lot of themselves in one another when they open up about their very traumatic and dangerous childhoods. And we see that a lot with folks in our support group, that people really find comfort knowing that they're not alone in their situation, that their abuser has isolated them and made them fearful to make respecting, lovable, open communication relationships because they've had to navigate in a way that doesn't foster those relationships. And so people who have experienced abuse often find really meaningful relationships with other people who have experienced abuse because they can empathize, they can say, we're not alone in this. So I think that was really meaningful for Bethany and Ramona to have that conversation. But that happens a couple of seasons after Bethany has this conversation with her dad. I think it's her stepfather, but she refers to him as the only dad that she's really known. And so she goes to Florida to chat with him. And before she does that, she meets with a friend to kind of talk about it. And the friend is a old friend. I think they knew each other in high school. And so she was aware of the dynamics of Bethany's parents. and even just the way that they're talking about the childhood abuse that Bethany's witnessed, or the abuse that she's witnessed in her childhood, rather, is a little problematic. And so the friend says, well, your dad had a bad temper. She made him crazy, as if a woman is supposed to be controlling a man's behavior. That's a common narrative that we see, I think, in society, that, well, why didn't she just not do that? Couldn't she have just done what he asked for? And then that situation could have just been avoided. So it puts blame on the victim again. But it also really shows how children are used as bargaining chips a lot of the times in violent or abusive relationships, that the custody of kids can be used to control or manipulate one parent against the other. And so Bethany has this conversation with her friend in preparation to go talk with her dad. And so when she talks with her dad, we get a lot of really interesting themes. She says that she's not really, like, she wouldn't change anything about her childhood if she could, that the abuse made her who she is. She's stronger because of it. And to me, that's a really dangerous road to go down, because kids don't need abuse to be stronger. Kids should be safe and should be empowered. That I fully recognize that when terrible, traumatic things happen, the way we deal with them is to try to put puzzle pieces in our lives together. But Bethany also goes back to say, I hold no anger. He's a good person and you can feel that. So it's a lot of melding of trying to reconcile these feelings of love with the terrible things the person that you've loved has done. And we see that a lot with anyone who has an abusive partner, because at the end of the day, most likely they fell in love with that person. That person's not a monster 100% of the time. We know there's a cycle of abuse where there's a buildup, there's an explosion, and then there's a honeymoon. And so that person loves them and really wants to try to make it work. And I think we see that coming out with Bethany and her relationship with her father. When they kind of talk about everything, her father, John, says, I'm sorry for what you've experienced. Like, he keeps repeating that phrase, which to me is kind of like a cop-out, because it's not taking accountability that he had a hand in that experience. It's just saying, I'm sorry for the circumstances, not saying I'm sorry that I caused those circumstances. So I think that that's a way a lot of abusers say they are going to be better. They want to change. But at the end of the day, the first step of change is to take accountability for your actions. And then it kind of concludes with Bethany saying that other people have experienced worse trauma. But that's also a common thing that abusers say to kind of invalidate their own feelings.
I would agree with everything you say, and you're the resident expert. I think in Bethany we see what is a perfect example of what I call the afterlife of the abuse, not PTSD, but more like these lingering consequences that permeate all aspects of one's life, as you just demonstrated. So I guess I would actually like to ask you about Leanne from Real Housewives of Dallas.
Yeah.
In conversation with this, how do people survive their abuse? In some ways, what are their coping mechanisms? I just think that there's something about this kind of afterlife and how women are making, in these cases, these women are making sense of what happened to them and how it becomes a story arc.
And I feel like Bethany, Ramona, and Leanne demonstrate different coping methods.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. So I just watched the episode of Dallas where they're sitting around the table and Leanne is talking about her abuse. And everyone, they're in Mexico at the new Carrie's house. And everyone seems to be really tired of Leanne bringing up the abuse that happened to her. But as someone who works in the field, to me, that kind of triggers something in me that says, okay, she hasn't actually processed the abuse. And she wants to talk to people about it. And it can be really damaging if you want to talk to people about it and then you keep getting shut down of now is not the appropriate time. We'll talk about it later. At the same time, people do need to be held accountable for their own actions. But I think it's the responsibility of society to understand how abuse and trauma can influence people's actions as well.
Do you think that the way that Leanne brings it up is similar or different to how Ramona does?
To me, I feel like Ramona brings it up a little less than Leanne. But I do think it's a lot of the same, not really taking responsibility for your actions. And if we look back to how John, Bethany's dad, said, I'm sorry for your experiences, and didn't take responsibility for his actions. If you haven't had a clear outline of how to take responsibility for your actions and to learn that it's okay to make mistakes, and you say, I'm sorry, I will change my behavior, and that's totally fine. If you haven't had that framework, then it's really hard for you to kind of navigate in that space.
I think your comments hit on this really important point in that sometimes survivors want to only respond to their abusers in the negative or surround them with love. But this accountability point, at what point do the people who are victims, are you also saying that they need to take some kind of accountability for their own actions? Is that what you're saying, or did I take that too far?
Right. So I would say that it's never the victim or survivor's fault, any of the trauma or the abuse. But I think perhaps in the same way that everyone who wants to be mindful of their actions might understand, why am I hesitant to, commit to this person in my life? Is it because why am I afraid of commitment? And examining your own life. That I just think it's a good thing that most everybody examines their life.
So more about self-awareness.
Right. Absolutely.
Okay, great.
What about moments when women are being abusive on Bravo shows? How are women committing abuse positioned differently on the shows, or maybe dismissed or ignored in these moments? I'm thinking about Kate Chastain, for one, on Below Deck, and her 2016 domestic violence arrest.
Yeah, so I think especially on Housewives, we see a huge dismissal of it. That on Roni, with Jules and with Kelly, it's not really brought up until the finale, and then it's brought up as one question, and then they move on about it. And I think it's seen that so I think a lot of the times we see that, the woman is being positioned as the abuser. A, that couldn't happen. B, if that did happen, it couldn't be so bad, is the narrative that I think we get a lot of the time.
Yeah, but this is, of course, not true, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Right, because we know intimate partner violence is about power and control. Physical violence can happen, but then there's a range of emotional abuse, financial abuse, economic abuse for financial abuse, just different isolation techniques. And so we know that it can go in all directions. It doesn't just have to be based in a heterosexual relationship, with the man being abusive towards the woman. I think when we get those storylines where it falls out of the norm, we don't really know how to handle it. And so it just gets brushed under the rug.
So can we thank you. First of all, thank you for all of this kind of deep dive into some of the most disturbing aspects of reality television. I want to pivot just quickly to Southern Charm. I don't know if you watch Southern Charm.
Yes, I do.
Excellent. So can we talk about the dynamic between Thomas and Catherine? What can you say using Thomas and Catherine as an example about the life cycle of controlling relationships or the life cycle of abuse?
Yeah. So Thomas and Catherine was actually a pretty interesting, almost study to see with me and my girlfriends, because I was very much in the same way that we talked about Russell. Like, to me, Thomas was showing signs, like classic abuser signs from season 1. But a lot of my girlfriends watching the show very much thought that, Catherine was the one bringing down the relationship. But we see a lot of power and control with Catherine and Thomas, that there's the life cycle of their relationship very much is get together, move in, twice they had children together, and then kind of live in this honeymoon period, especially when Catherine's pregnant, where Thomas offers to pay her rent, make sure she's set up, make sure people aren't attacking her. And then once she has the children, Thomas really aims to isolate her from all of her friends.
Do you see a lot of cases every day in your center at St. Louis?
Of
various types of domestic violence issues, whether it's, intimate partner violence, child abuse, issues of healthcare workers. What does a day at your shelter look like?
Oh, sure. So we are a 30-bed shelter. Consistently, though, we have more than 30 folks with us. If mom and kiddo or kiddos want to co-sleep together, then we let them let that happen. So if there's like a mom and her 3-year-old want to share the bed, we let that happen. So typically we hover around 34 people in shelter. We get hotlines 24/7, 365 days a year. We're always staffed. But because we usually are over capacity, we can't accept everyone. So we try to refer them out to our partner programs. But it is very challenging for people to find a program that will accept them and then also fit their needs. So the shelter that I work at is very inclusive, and we serve anyone of any gender. And we also don't look at their relationship to their abuser. So some shelters say it has to be intimate partner violence. So if they're getting abused by a cousin or a brother, they wouldn't take that person into their shelter. We're very fortunate that our framework allows us to bring those people into our shelter.
Thank you. I just feel like it's important to let people know what this looks like, right? Like what a day in your life looks like, helping people and the kinds of cases you see, and how potentially difficult it could be for somebody to find a place of refuge to go to, while they are trying to find help and a way out of their situation and back on their feet.
Right. Yeah. Something that was super shocking to me when I started working here was the amount of clients that come in who don't have their license, Social Security card, or birth certificate, because their abuser has either taken it or has physically destroyed it in front of them, which then makes it extremely hard to leave, because then you don't have any identification of who you are. So you can't get a job. You can't enroll your kids in school. If you get pulled over, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. So really, a lot of our shelters in the area have a 30 or 60 day limit, and we try not to work within those limits. We try to have longer stays than that, just because by virtue of the process, it takes a couple weeks to get a new birth certificate.
Yeah.
And so, you can't get a new job if you don't have a Social Security card.
Right. So, Rosie, can we take this moment to break from the actual conversation about Bravo and acknowledge the fact that, some of our listeners might actually be in an abusive relationship or they're starting to realize some of these cycles of violence that you speak about. Can you just give us the quick kind of, there's not a quick rundown, but if someone is in one of these situations, could you give them a little bit of advice beyond calling a hotline? What kind of documents should they put aside?
Yeah.
When would they know when to leave? Just general advice.
Right. So a big part of what we do is safety planning. So if you're able to acquire your documents, get them, put them in a folder, maybe keep them in your purse or somewhere that you can keep track of them. If you're able to keep a packed overnight bag in your trunk or in the garage that you could just grab and go with. If you're comfortable telling a family or a friend or a family member or a friend about the situation, or have a code word or a code phrase that if you told that to them or you texted that to them, they would know to send law enforcement, police, any emergency responders to your location. And then just some practical stuff too. That's practical, but practical in the moment of if an abusive, violent incident was happening, trying to position yourself so you're closest to the door so you can exit, and then moving away from kitchens because there are lots of knives, sharp objects in the kitchens, and then being aware if your partner owns any guns or firearms. That can really change the dynamic very quickly in a situation.
And what about if people have children? What is there any advice? Do they gather the children? Do they put the children somewhere first?
Yeah. So what we say is each survivor is the expert of their experience. So they know if it's going to upset their partner or their abuser more if they send the kids away versus if they can play a movie downstairs and make sure their kids are far away from the incident that may take place. They're the ones who know what's going to be the best situation for that. Each state has different laws about parental kidnapping. So I'm in St. Louis, and in Missouri, domestic violence is one of the exceptions that if you've experienced domestic violence and you take your kids, then you can't be charged with parental kidnapping, but each state has its own set of laws around that.
Thank you. I just felt like it was going to be a missed opportunity if we did not kind of acknowledge that people could be struggling with this right now. And here we have
Absolutely.
An expert, right? Here we have an expert.
Thank you so much.
No, thank you. Thank you.
So I'd like to wrap up this conversation on various forms of abuse by talking about the issue of cyber harassment and revenge porn that's come up on Vanderpump Rules with Stassi and one of her ex-boyfriends. Can you talk to us about what happened in this case and how this affected Lisa and Stassi's relationship? And how did Stassi end up dealing with this incident in her book?
Yeah. So Stassi, in season 1, when she broke up with Jax, for a brief time, she started dating a person named Frank, and then they broke up, and I think if we remember correctly, he got fired from SUR because he was threatening to assault a customer, but like in a very 8th grade, like he threatened to give him a wedgie, which is an assault, and also just like a very odd threat for a professional in the workplace to give a customer. But it's kind of built up that already Frank is not this nice guy. And then later we learn that he asked Stassi, I think, for a sex tape for a video of her masturbating, but that he wanted to see her face in the video. And she kind of alludes when she's talking with her girlfriends that she wasn't super comfortable showing her face, but that's what he wanted, so that's what she did. And then later she found out that, first he went to her and said he was going to release the tape for $900, but he wouldn't if he gave her $900. And Stassi said, I'm not going to deal with that. But then he went to Lisa and Ken and told them the same thing. And Ken and Lisa paid him the $900 in cash and just made it disappear. And Stassi felt like Lisa really took the narrative of, you should be thanking me for this. I was the hero in that situation. Quote, I took care of it. And so Stassi and Lisa had a falling out about this, among other things. And then when they try to come back together to reconcile, there's a lot of victim blaming that comes from Lisa's side, telling Stassi that, I told you he was sleazy. We helped you out with this. And then you turned around, and I think it was at that point Stassi had told Lisa that she was an old woman. And so Lisa felt very hurt by that after she had just done this for Stassi. So we see that a lot of Stassi's agency in the situation was taken away because, first off, she sent a video to her partner at the time, which we can assume she only wanted her partner to see. She didn't consent for other people to see it. And then she also didn't consent for anyone else to pay him for it not to be seen. That she didn't really get to control her own narrative there. So she didn't really speak out about it until her book, when she named that it was indeed Frank who was that person who tried to exploit her.
Can you tell us what's next for you? You teach, you work at the center. I also think we haven't necessarily mentioned it, but we probably should, that these sorts of abuses can happen regardless of what your relationship looks like, or relationships, right? Like, this happens within families. This happens, within the LGBTQ plus community too. It just isn't something that happens between heterosexual couples like we see on Bravo. So what do you want people to know about your work, shelter, how to seek help, anything at all? What's next for you?
So I'm going to continue on in my life of teaching, working at the shelter, and really pursuing those aspects in my life. I would also really be interested in delving into becoming an expert witness for court cases. And so being able to give testimony about what a typical relationship looks like, the power and control cycles, and trying to enlighten people using the legal system so we can hopefully get more just results in that part of our society. I'm also writing a chapter for the historians on Housewives book on intimate partner violence.
Ooh, which we're so excited about.
Yeah, I'm very excited.
I think it's such an important topic, and it's really, I think, like you've said at the very beginning of the podcast, it's not something that's typically portrayed on the television in this kind of way, or can be such an important tool for talking about.
Yeah, so I'm excited to catch up on more of the franchises, more of the cities, so I can make sure my chapter is super inclusive and really looks at all of the dimensions of intimate partner violence. And if anyone has any ideas, inputs, I would love to be able to chat about that. Email is probably the best way at Rosemarie, ROSEMARIE, Jones, JONES, 98 at Gmail.
And do you have a Twitter or anything like that you use?
I have an Instagram, and that handle is Rosemarie, how it's spelled in my email, but with 3 E's, and then Jones.
Great. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you.
I feel like this was a really important episode, and it's I think filled with a lot of things that it's tough to think about and talk about, but it's really important to sit with.
Indeed. And Rosie, as I tell my students when we do Black Women's History, particularly Black women in violence, self-care is so very important. So thank you for the work you do. And I hope that you engage in some kind of self-care after this episode and each weekend.
Thank you so much. I'm on my way for margaritas.
Beautiful.
Yay. Thank you. And we're so looking forward to your chapter and working with you more with Historians on Housewives.
Thank you. Me too.
Thank you for joining us on another episode of Historians on Housewives. As always, you can find us at historiansonhousewives.com, where you can propose your own episode topic or journal article, ask us questions, and send us feedback. You can also follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Our handle is at HistoriansH, and we tweet Sunday through Thursday. Thank you, Rosemary Jones. This show was brought to you with support by Barbara and Mark Spear, Saddleback Community College, Christina Hinkle, Christina Gamberpour, Jed Merlasky, Pete Murray, Cody Baker, Molly Callahan, Dr. Joaquin Galarza, Courtney Crow, Lara Loper, Kim Bettendorf, and Luis Ocio de Dios. And remember, scholars do Bravo too. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Historians on Housewives. As always, you can find us at historiansonhousewives.com, where you can propose your own episode topic, journal article, ask us questions, send us feedback. You can also follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at HistoriansH. And of course, there's our tweets that we do Sunday through Thursday. So interact with us. Let us know what you're thinking. And you can always
do this one more time.
Sorry. All of a sudden something like bled together and I was like, what is at Historians Housewives podcast?
Pregnancy brain.
Totally.
Do we have at Historians on Housewives podcast?
No, we don't. I don't know how it even appeared there. So I was
We don't have a Historians on Housewives podcast?
No.
We don't have a Historians on Housewives podcast. We're doing that right now?
Not as an at. It's at
she just created that out of nowhere.
That's why it was written on the paper. I read the paper. Okay.